How is American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney's recent ad about good jeans any different from how other major retailers have utilized puns about good jeans with a J in their advertising? I did a deep dive into some historical advertising archives to break down the differences. Before we delve into the historical archives and really get into our analysis, let's just briefly break down what the American Eagle controversy is in general. Basically, if you haven't seen the ad, it starts off with Sydney Sweeney has great jeans with a G, Sydney walks over, crosses that out, and puts jeans with a J. So the entire pun of the ad is that Sydney Sweeney has great jeans as in genetics, and American Eagle has great jeans as in jeans. Now, the issue is that the ad is getting a lot of flack for being eugenics propaganda because of how American Eagle utilizes great jeans with the G, and basically feeds into this idea of there being good genes and bad genes, which is a very eugenics premise. So let's get into the historical archives to see, is this just common? Is American Eagle unnecessarily getting flack for this? And have other major retailers who've done similar advertisements done the same thing? The first ad that we're pulling from the archives is the one that allegedly inspired the American Eagle ad in the first place. It's this 1980s Calvin Klein advertisement featuring Brooke Shields, in which Brooke Shields, who's 14 at the time, is explaining to viewers what she has been learning in her recent science classes about genetics. Now in the ad, Brooke breaks down three main ways that a gene can undergo mutation. Number one being selective mating, number two being genetic drift, and number three being natural selection. Now the natural selection part is really what has to do with Calvin Klein and where the main punch of the ad comes in. And basically, she says, and I quote, "Some genes are better equipped than others to survive in the environment, and it may result in the origin of an entirely new species at times. That brings us to Calvin and survival of the fittest," basically in which Calvin Klein is saying that their genes are the fittest of all of the other genes. Now, when comparing the Calvin Klein and American Eagle ad, it's important and critical to know that even though genetics are explicitly talked about at length in the Calvin Klein ad, it's not done in the same way as the American Eagle ad, because whereas the American Eagle ad explicitly says Sydney Sweeney has great genes with a G, this ad talks about genetics, but it doesn't say that Brooke Shields has great genes. It doesn't imply anything about the audience having good or bad genes. It doesn't really make a comment or really apply a positive or negative tilt to the genes being discussed. It just is talking about different ways of genetic mutation. And then the final punchline is notably centered on Calvin Klein having the fittest genes with the J. At that point, we've moved on from talking about genes with the G. The next ad that we're pulling from the archives is this Tommy Hilfiger and Aaliyah collab from the 90s. Now, similarly to the Brooke Shields ad, genetics are a topic in this advertisement, but it's notably different how it's done. Aaliyah starts off by basically talking about where she gets different traits from. And then the punchline of the ad is, "And Tommy's not my dad, but I have Tommy's genes," because she literally has on Tommy Hilfiger jeans. So as we can see, this is, again, notably different from the American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney ad, because nowhere in this entire advertisement does anybody talk about good genes, bad genes. She didn't even say if Tommy's genes are good or bad. She just says she has on Tommy's jeans. And the last ad I'm going to point out is this one from Old Navy featuring Precious Lee, in which the caption is, "Precious Lee has good genes with a J." No mention is made to jeans with a G here at all. Now, as I continued to delve back in the gene advertising archives, going as far back as I could, I quickly realized that majority of the advertisements could be sorted into basically one of the three variations that we just talked about. It was either a Calvin Klein style ad where it starts off with a genetic lesson that ends with some kind of pun about their genes being the fittest, genes with the J being the fittest, or it's a Tommy Hilfiger style where the person starts off talking about all their different traits and then ends off with a comment about how they got their jeans like that they're wearing from that brand. Or it's an Old Navy Precious Lee style where basically they just say we have good genes with a J and don't actually explicitly say anything about genes or genetics at all. And therein lies the difference between the American Eagle ad and all these other gene advertisements as they've been done historically. Whereas the other ads make it very explicit that their punchline is genes with a J, the American Eagle ad actually has a dual punchline, that being Sydney Sweeney has great genes with a G and we have great genes with a J. That is where the eugenics controversy comes in. Now, I won't delve too deep into my historical soapbox about eugenics and all the things to do with that because I am a history PhD student who likes archives too much, and because my research interests are around eugenics and race construction and race conception in America, I could really talk for ages about that. But what I will say is that eugenics propaganda does typically focus a lot on this idea of who has good genes and who has bad genes. And whereas the other gene advertisement that we've talked about didn't do that, the American Eagle ad did. And that, in combination with the current socio-political climate we're in and the fact that there has been a sharp uptick in eugenics thought and the fact that there's also been a sharp presentation of supremacy among other things, is exactly why this advertisement in this current climate is rightly getting controversy. Because it's one thing to talk about good genes with a J in advertising, but it's a whole other thing to say someone has great genes with a G.